Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. So today is going to be a bit strange. I've already actually filmed this video and I forgot to include something in it. So I've come back a few days later to cut in the introduction, show you the thing that I forgot to show, and then it will cut back into the video I filmed before. So this is a Beatles update, a Beatles collection update, which I've not done for a long time. And when we cut back into the video later, I might explain why I'm getting back into the Beatles again, but we'll see. Anyway, so the thing I forgot to show you in the video that you haven't seen yet is some vinyl, actually. So this is a record I picked up last week at Heightside Records in Lancaster, and really pleased to get it, and I will show you what it is. It is a 1984 repress of Beatles for Sale in stereo. And when I was at the stall, they had a couple of these. They had a 1984 stereo reissue, and they also had a 1960s mono copy, and I was 98% sure that I already had a mono 60s copy of Beatles for Sale. I couldn't quite remember if it was a stereo or a mono, and I really had to think carefully. The copy they had, the mono copy they had quite a nasty scratch on it, so I was pretty much predisposed to leave it behind anyway. In the end, I kind of felt the scratch and thought, I don't really want my stylus going over that, so I thought, right, I'll grab the stereo 84 repress, much nicer condition than my 60s version, which I'll show you in a minute. And this one, like I said, 1984, sounds good. And nice to have a stereo version of it. And I've always loved the packaging on this record. It's interesting that the Beatles, this record is known for being possibly the weakest album in their catalogue. It's the one that they made when they were, basically a bit tired and didn't have much songwriting energy left, although the originals on this record are brilliant. But so it's interesting that they went to town on the packaging and made arguably a record sleeve which is more interesting than maybe Rubber Soul and Revolver, just in terms of having a really nice gatefold, and it always confuses me the way that the record is kind of tucked inside there, and never quite get my head around that, but there we go. I'll show you the record. I did check it out on Discogs, and it is a 1984 repressing, so there we go. And the beautiful black and white Parlophone label. So yeah, delighted to get that, and I'll quickly show you the mono version that I had already. I've got a Kitten down here, so I'm hoping she's not going to jump onto my records. This is my mono 60s copy. Comes from 1964. It's an original pressing, but it's in decent shape. But there's a few sound issues on this, a few bits of snap, crackle and pop and so on. I'll show you the record here too. This one is on the yellow logo Parlophone label, PMC 1240. So this is the only vinyl copy, or it was the only vinyl copy I had of Beatles for Sale, and so really pleased that I've now got the stereo. So there we go. Beatles for Sale. Thank you very much to the guys at Heightside Records for providing that for me. So yeah, I'll just quickly show you the Kitten. Here she is. This is Stella. Yeah, so more of that later. So I'll cut back in now to the video I made before, and I'll show you plenty of stuff coming up, some CDs, books, DVDs, etc. So hope you enjoy. Bye. I went to Liverpool a few weeks back and had a great time. Went to the Empress pub, which is the pub that features on the front of the Ringo album, Sentimental Journey, and that reminded me that I hadn't heard this album for many years. I mean, 30 years or more. I'd never actually owned it. I had it on a cassette many years ago, so thought I would grab a CD of Sentimental Journey. This is the record that Ringo made. It was the first ever Beatles solo album, I think. Came out in 1970. It might have come out after some of the strange George Harrison electronic albums. Not entirely sure of the chronology, but it was the first proper, what you might call mainstream Beatles solo album. It was a record that Ringo made for his mother, really. Lots of old standards, jazz standards from back in the day. Incredible range of arrangers on here, and a range of arrangers. I mean, you've got George Martin and Paul McCartney, but also you've got all kinds of people, amazing people. Quincy Jones arranges Love Is a Many Splendid Thing. and Elmer Bernstein does Have I Told You Lately That I Love You, and Oliver Nelson doing Blue Turning Grey Over You. Astonishing. I had no idea that this album had been done with so many illustrious collaborators, but there you go, it had been. Very enjoyable record. He does it in his own way, in his own style. He's not Frank Sinatra. Don't think he would ever pretend to be. And but the arrangements are beautiful, and Ringo does a good job. He's very characterful. His personality shines through the tracks, and I think the record probably did what he intended it to do, which is to be a fond and nostalgic look back at some of his musical roots, I guess. Even though Ringo clearly came from the R&B scene in Liverpool, like most of the Beatles, his roots stretch back further into popular standards and music that he would have heard around the house growing up, and I think these songs were big favourites of his mother's. So anyway, really nice to grab that at last. At some point I will do a review of that. So let's whiz through these. Now this, I picked this up recently because, actually no, let's start with the book, and that will give some context. I picked up a copy of this book, which is a book I used to have many years ago, and I got rid of my copy of it because I had read it and I figured I probably wouldn't read it again, and it's such a huge book. I mean, look how big it is, and I am short of shelf space always, but I couldn't resist buying this again. After the trip to Liverpool, I was really starting to get back into the history of the Beatles. And this is an extraordinary book. It's by Keith Badman, a day-by-day diary. So it goes from Wednesday, April the 1st, 1970. Starts with Ringo becomes the last Beatle to play at a Beatles recording session at EMI's Abbey Road studios in London. When working with Phil Spector in Studio One, he overdubs his drum parts on the tracks Across the Universe, The Long and Winding Road, and I Me Mine. So it starts off there, Wednesday, April the 1st, 1970. Finishes March the 24th, 25th and 26th in the year 2000. And it's basically what did the Beatles do pretty much every day in between those two dates. So it's incredibly interesting for tracing back, particularly in the early years of the 1970s, you know, getting into all the litigation, following John and Yoko as they just buzz back and to between England and New York, getting up to all kinds of strange things, bed-ins and charity events. And you watch Wings coming together, obviously, George doing the Bangladesh concerts and starting to pull together the All Things Must Pass record, and it's just really, really interesting. Ringo doing some film work in the early 1970s. So I'm kind of not very far through it again, and it's a book I never thought I would read again, but I decided I wanted it, so I'm going to have to find some shelf space now. But an extremely essential book if you're a Beatles fan, and that will keep you company on dark nights. So really pleased to grab that. So the reason then that I grabbed this DVD was because of that book, really. It just occurred to me a ridiculous amount of time since I've watched Imagine. This is the John Lennon movie Imagine, which came out in, I think it was 1986, was it, or 1988? And I watched this a lot back in the early 90s when I first got it. It would have been on VHS then. Used to watch it all the time, in fact, and I just haven't seen it since. Really, genuinely surprised me when I looked back and thought, hang on a minute, I haven't watched Imagine for so long. It was the entry in this book where they talked about John and Yoko having a visitor. A young guy comes and rocks up at their house, basically, and camps down in the woods outside their house, and they take pity on him and bring him into the house and give him some food. And I was reminded that there's a whole sequence in Imagine where that's filmed, and you actually see that going on. So haven't watched it yet. It's a 2-disc special edition. Really looking forward to digging back into this again. Such a classic film, so much great footage on here. And like I said, I can't quite believe it's been so many years since I saw it. It's just one of those things. The years go by and you just lose track, you know. And lastly, this one was just a charity shop find. Really pleased to find this. Got this from Oxfam. This is John Lennon Skywriting by Word of Mouth. And it's a collection of Lennon's fiction and non-fiction illustrated by his own drawings, written between 1968 and 1979 and never published. So I've never actually owned his books in his own right, and A Spaniard in the Works. So not for any reason particularly, I've just never run across them. So it was great to get this. It was only £2.99, so I figured I couldn't leave it behind, really. No real pictures in here, just the occasional Lennon drawn image. You've all seen these before, but yeah, just a nice thing to find in Oxfam going cheap. So I thought I would grab it. So there we go, that's my Beatles pickups for, where are we, September 2022. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll be back soon. Take care, bye.